Hi, welcome back to Civil Discourse Now. I'm Mark Small, co-host with Paul Ogden, and we're here with our studio audience. And thank you for coming here. Thank you for watching us wherever you are on the planet, or if you're at the International Space Station.
We're on Mars.
No, they don't have reception on Mars.
Not that you know of. Current TV, I think.
Well, maybe. Oh, you're putting current TV on Mars. Don't do that. Our guests today are Jeff Cox, J.R. Cox Law, LLC, and Nicolas Martin. He's a longtime libertarian. And Nicolas was just going off at the end of the last segment
going off
on government and saying government causes more problems than it solves. Do you want to continue? Were you done with that thought, or do you want to?
No, I'm done with that thought. I think we should get to.
Oh, come on! I want to hear more.
Well, then,
go get it. What happened in Montana?
Okay, in Montana, the Supreme Court, the Attorney General. Okay, wait a minute. There was a guy that started a painting and drywall business, and there was another corporation that all it did was funnel money into political campaigns for corporations. They sued to be able to do that, and the Attorney General of the state of Montana fought it to defend the statute. They each filed summary judgment. The district court in Montana ruled that the plaintiffs, in other words, like this one business, it was a drywall business with one guy, that they were right because the United States Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, meant that there couldn't be any restrictions like the 1912 statute that was enacted because of C.W. Moore, and that C.W. Moore, who's despised by Mark Twain, that there was nothing that they could do that the Supreme Court authority held. The dissents in the Montana case both say they really don't like Citizens United, but they had to vote against the majority of the court because they felt that the majority of the court had to follow, because of the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution, the United States Supreme Court decision. Now, the Montana Supreme Court essentially said the reason why we're not bound by Citizens United, or why, first of all, they distinguish Citizens United, and that's always one means by which a court or lawyers can argue that authority doesn't apply. When we were off camera, Nicolas made an impassioned argument about how lawyers have screwed things up in ways, and
we have, most definitely.
But it also said that because of Montana's specific history and because of all the problems they had with Moore and what had happened in the early 20th century and the late 19th century, that was why Montana's statute was to be distinguished. That doesn't say anything about the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution and ignoring Citizens United. I think Citizens United as a case sucks. I don't believe that I know that's a technical legal term, it sucks. But I don't believe that Justice Kennedy's decision is very well reasoned. I believe Justice Stevenson's dissent going back...
Stevenson.
I said Stevens. I said Stevenson? I apologize. Justice Stevenson's dissent... You're right, I did. Justice Stevens' dissent. It was because of the way those segue at the end. The dissent it traces the history of corporations in our country and talks about how corporations were very, very limited. They weren't the entities that we have today that can do... In Indiana, a corporation can do any legal thing. I mean, I think that's what if you incorporate... All you have to do is say in the charter, we're incorporating to do any legal thing in Indiana. Corporations were not like that at the beginning of the United States. They were chartered for a specific time and for a specific purpose. If you're going to go out and build a bridge, the corporation was in existence for the time it took to build the bridge, and then it went out of existence.
Corporations still today in Indiana there's a limit on how much they can contribute to political campaigns. But you can set up a PAC and give unlimited amounts. You can give unlimited amounts individually. But corporations are limited. Well, LLCs aren't, which is kind of ironic.
Well, I think getting money out of campaigns as much as possible is, I think, a worthy goal, because if people have a whole bunch of money, they're going to be able to do what they want to do with the government as compared to people who don't have any money at all. I mean, that's it.
Well, you're talking about maybe public finance campaigns or whatever. I know Jeff on the right is unusual in supporting that. The trouble is the incumbent always has a huge advantage, and giving them the same amount of money does not even the score.
Well, normally the incumbent has much more money than a challenger.
Well, that's true.
So it would come closer to evening.
But you have to, as a challenger, you have to spend so much just to get name ID before you move on.
Yeah. Actually,
we should give the challengers more money. That would even things out.
They, what is that? Ira Glasser, who used to be the executive director of the ACLU, and the ACLU actually, as a corporation, had to sue because its speech was infringed upon in decades past, in exactly the same kinds of ways by election laws.
They sued Nixon.
Glasser and others pointed out that Eugene McCarthy, who was the insurgent anti-war candidate against LBJ in 1968, his campaign was funded by three major funders. And McCarthy always said that and he basically toppled Johnson. McCarthy said that without the ability of those three funders, of major funders, to give large amounts of money, he would have had no opportunity to challenge Lyndon Johnson. And under Buckley, under subsequent election laws, McCarthy would have been forbidden from raising those large amounts of money from those individual donors.
Well, and in my opinion, keeping Eugene McCarthy out of politics was probably a good thing, not a bad thing.
He kept Johnson out.
So you don't have, is that a flippant answer, or are you actually advocating restricting the speech of people with whom you disagree?
It was Jeff's comment.
Yeah. It was my comment. No, he was bankrolled by three candidates, by three big things. Eugene McCarthy, in my opinion, was among the lowest of the presidential candidates ever in terms of his positions and in terms of the way he presented them. He was not good for the political process. I think having him in there is an argument in favor of restrictions.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. Here's a man who believes there should be restrictions based on the validity of the views of the candidate.
I didn't say it was based on that. I'm just saying you need to find a better presentation.
No, it doesn't matter who it is. It's best to take the worst example and say that everybody deserves freedom of speech, unfettered freedom of speech, not just people you agree with.
I didn't say Eugene McCarthy shouldn't have his freedom of speech.
Yes, you did.
No,
you said
I
it was
didn't.
a good thing. It would have been a good thing if he'd been prevented from having that money and having access to the campaign to oppose the war and oppose Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah, because you wouldn't have had a crappy candidate for president then. I didn't say restrict his freedom of speech. I said I didn't want him running.
Oh, wait, and I disagree that he was an anti-war candidate. He really wasn't talking about unilateral withdrawal from Vietnam. He
was an anti-American candidate.
No,
that's what he was.
No,
and a dishonest one at that.
Well, he was not talking about his position on the war today is overblown. He wasn't as anti-war as people think, and he didn't topple Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson, at that point of his career, really wasn't having fun in the office of president anymore.
It was Ted that toppled Lyndon Johnson.
Ted had a lot to do with it.
For the presentation of Ted.
And none of these things are relevant to the fact that McCarthy ran a campaign that was funded in a way that would have been illegal shortly thereafter.
And if the law had been different then, he would have looked at what the terrain was. It doesn't make it right that corporations, three corporations or large corporate entities were able to toss their money in behind him and he was able to provide some kind of dissent. They would have found other ways to do it. You take the large corporations out of the equation, the large money things. I mean, look, when the votes come down on any matters related to health care. The recent health care legislation that we had, I wanted to have national health care. But large health care concerns dumped a bunch of money in to everybody. And so we have a national mandate for private insurance that I don't agree with, but I think that at least it was some kind of, but they dumped all the money in. They got the votes. They've got the money. Where they have the money, and so
the government should have the right to do things to them, but they should not have the right to spend money to defend their own interests.
No, you shouldn't have a system where it's rigged so only the rich have effective means of speech.
But that's not the way it is.
It is.
And to the extent that it is, it has to do with the fact that government intervenes in aspects of life in America, impacts economic life, and corporations respond by protecting their interests. So get government out of those.
I disagree.
If you look at the coverage of the Republican primaries, they would talk. Everybody was doing this. They were doing it on Fox. They were doing it on MSNBC. They were doing it on the major networks. They'd show 4 or 5 candidates, and Ron Paul's name is right in there with the numbers superior to 2 or 3 of the other candidates. And let's say they had 5 candidates on there. They'd say, well, this is a 4-way race. It didn't matter if it was a major network or if it was, whatever. They were purposely excluding a person who was in corporate interest. I don't know that it was necessary.
He's alien to everybody's interest.
Yeah,
in fact, he's pretty much an alien to begin with.
The thing is, he was excluded from that, and it was like ignoring somebody across the board. Now, the people with a lot of money that were running big campaigns, they can counter by running ads. I mean, if they have a lot of money, they can put ads on the air, and they can make their presence known.
Well, Ron Paul has money, though.
Not as much as...
Who's excluding him? The corporations who own the media, right?
I think it's more of a media bias. They just didn't see him as a mainstream Republican candidate. Now they're going to have to, since he's finishing second.
Well, and the other thing is that there is a perception that he cannot win the presidency.
Yeah.
All he can do is drag down the GOP, and that's if he got the nomination, that's exactly what would happen.
But that's weird, because if we're going to go into that, the polls showed that if you include independent voters, that Ron Paul actually does better than the other Republican candidates against Obama.
And do you think those people are actually Republicans who are voting for them, or are they crossing over to just cause trouble for Republicans?
If you take each Republican candidate and pit him against Obama, Ron Paul has done better in some polls than any of the other Republican candidates, including Romney. But that's neither here nor there.
No, I don't buy that information based on the crosstabs I've seen. But the thing is, your point about Eugene McCarthy bankrolled by 3 people, that is, and we can have it today with George Soros, who is a malevolent individual who does not like capitalism, does not like the United States. He could bankroll entirely a presidential candidate, make him flush with cash, and he could win. And that would not be in the interest of the United States as it is, because he's demonstrated a hatred for the United States, and he is anti-U.S. interests, and we can't have one person like that bankrolling a single candidate. That's an argument in favor of campaign restrictions, not against them.
Going back to what Nicholas said, because we're getting right towards the end now. What you were saying a while ago about when government gets involved and it screws things up. There's only one society that I can think of that in modern time I've seen on television where they did not have a problem with that. And that was on Gilligan's Island. Gilligan's Island, there was no government. Everybody got along. The skipper would whack Gilligan upside the head with his cap once in a while, but otherwise,
Well, Gilligan kept them on the island because he kept screwing up.
Well, and the professor could build a nuclear reactor out of 2 coconuts, but he couldn't build a boat. We've had fun today. Nicolas Martin, Jeff Cox, been our guests. Thanks, guys, for coming on. It's been spirited discussion. I hope you will tune in next week. Thanks very much. This is Civil Discourse Now.